Okay, guys, so this is lesson 1 of the consumer math in MTSS. Your your guiding question is, what is a percent? And how are percentages related to fractions and decimals? The objective is to discover what a percent is and how it's related to fractions and decimals. Okay, so when you're doing consumer math, like taxes and tipping and finding a percentage of a number, you obviously need to know what a percentage is. So, oh, look at that. Our do now is, what is a percentage? So just right there in the guiding question and the student objective, it's related to fractions and decimals. So we know that fractions are always out of a whole, right? And then you also know that decimals are always out of base 10 and that you can find equivalent decimals and fractions. So they're all related. So a percentage is a part of a whole. And percentages are always out of 100. And we use this symbol as our percent, okay? So think of that as we do this work, and let's see how we can figure out how percentages, decimals, and fractions are all related. So if Miss Mahoney ate 50% of her oranges, how can she show 50% as a fraction and as a decimal? So we don't know how many oranges she had, and we don't know how much the number of oranges she actually ate. We do know that she ate 50% of them. So if we write 50%, just like we did up here for 100%, we need to figure out what is that equivalent to as a fraction and as a decimal. Well, if we know that a percentage is part of a whole and the whole is always 100%, that means that this percent, 50%, is equivalent to 50 out of 100. So there is your fraction, 50 out of 100, or 50 hundredths, which if you think about equivalent fractions is also equivalent to 5/10, which is also equivalent to 1/2. So she ate 1/2 of her oranges. Now, again, I do not know how many 1/2 is. I don't know the exact number because I don't know how many she actually started with. So what is this written as a decimal then? Well, 50 hundredths is very easily converted into a decimal because you know that all decimals are out of placed out of your base 10. They're in tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, and so on. So in this case, this says 50 hundredths. So I have 0 wholes, and then I have 50 hundredths. Now the 5 goes in the tenths place because the 0 in 50 needs to go in the hundredths place. So this is written as 50 hundredths. Okay? And then we can also use this fraction right here to write a decimal. And 5/10 is written as 0.5. 5/10. Okay? So we have 50% is equivalent to 1/2 and is equivalent to 5/10. These are the most reduced, simplest forms of that number. Now, there's lots of different ways that you could write that, but that's the most reduced. So this next one is how we're actually going to figure out how to calculate a percentage of a number. So if Miss Mahoney ate 50% of 10 oranges, so now we know how many she started off with. She came home from the grocery store, or she ordered Amazon Fresh or Instacart, and she had 10 oranges, and she ate 50% of them. So how many did she eat? So we're trying to find 50% of 10, right? So 50% of 10. So to figure this out, well, you can think logically of this and you can say, well, I know that 50% is 1/2. So 1/2 of 10, well, if you picture them in your head and you have 10 oranges and you cut that in half, you know it's going to be 5, right? Now, to do this mathematically, you're going to use multiplication. Now, when you think about it, I know my 5th graders have done lots of multiplication of fractions, so you know that if you're taking 1/2 of 10, you're actually multiplying. So if you take 1/2 times 10, you get 10 halves, which is equivalent to 5, right? Now you can do this with these other fractions that we used up here too, right? You could do 5/10 times 10, and that equals 50/10, which is also equivalent to 5, right? Now you can also do this using decimals. So we know that 50% is also equivalent to the most reduced form of 5/10. So I'm going to do 5/10 times 10. Now, if you don't know how to multiply decimals, it's pretty simple. You just multiply the digits as if they were whole numbers. So I'm going to pretend like that 5/10 is 5, and I'm going to multiply it times 10. So 5 times 10 is 50, right? But that's not your final answer. We know that because we know it's 5. You have one digit behind the decimal in this factor. So you need to put one digit behind the decimal in your product. So if the decimal starts here in 50, you pull it over to here, and your answer is 5. Okay, so 50% of 10 equals 5. Let's check this one out. So if Miss Mahoney finished 75% of her grading and she had 84 papers to grade, 75%, did I say that? She finished 75% of her grading and she had 84 papers to grade. How many did she have left to grade? So we're finding, first step is to find 75% of 84. All right, so that looks kind of complicated, but we can break it down pretty simply. So we know that 75% is equivalent to 75 out of 100, which as an equivalent fraction is also 3/4. So if we multiply 3/4 times 84, let's see what we get. I'm going to go ahead and use my calculator. 84 times 3 equals 252 over 4 divided by 4 equals 63. Okay, so that means 63. She's graded 63 papers, but that's not what we want to know. It doesn't say that, it doesn't ask how many papers she graded. It asks how many she had left if she started with 84. So you do simple subtraction, and she has 21 papers left to grade. Now you can also do this using decimals. So we know that 75% is also 75 hundredths, right? And we're going to multiply that by 84. So if you were to multiply these by whole numbers, now I have my calculator right here, so I could just type in 0.75 times 84. But I'm going to do it as if we didn't have a calculator, but I want to do it kind of quickly. So 75 times 84. So I'm just going to pretend like this is 75 times 84 as like I did right here. Pretend like they're just whole numbers. And I get 6,300. However, that's not our answer, is it? Well, we know it's 63 over here, right? So if there are 2 place values behind the decimal here, that means there needs to be 2 place values behind the decimal in my product. So if it starts here, I move it over 2 times, and my answer is 63. Now again, that's not our final answer because it says how many did she have left. So then you would do your simple subtraction and get 21 papers. All right, let's check this one out. It's pretty similar. If Miss Mahoney had to run 18 miles and had run 25% already, how many miles did she still have to run? So this is a 2-step problem also. You need to find 25% of 18, and then you need to find out how many she has left over or how much she has left to run by subtracting whatever this is from 18. Okay, so 25% we know is 25 out of 100, which we know is also equivalent to 1/4. So let's find 1/4 of 18 by multiplying. So 1/4 of 18 is equivalent to 18/4, which is equivalent to 4 and 2/4, which is equivalent to 4 and 1/2. So that means 25% of 18 is 4.5 miles, right? So then how many miles does she have left to run? Well, 18 minus 4.5 is 13.5 miles left, right? Now let's see if we can figure out how to do this with a decimal. So 25% is also written as 0.25, and we're going to multiply that times 18. Now I'm going to pretend like they're just straight whole numbers, or this one is just a whole number, and I'm going to just count it as 25. So 25 times 18 equals 450, but we know that's not our answer. We know our answer is 4.5. So how would I write 450 as 4.5? Well, think there's 2 place values behind the decimal here, so there needs to be 2 place values behind the decimal here, and my answer is 4.5, which also is equivalent to 4.5. But that's not my final answer. That's 25% of 18. That's a fourth of what she needs to complete, which is 18. So we're going to subtract that, and we're going to get 13.5 miles. Got it? All right, so how do you find a percentage of a number? What did we do? We multiplied the fraction or decimal by the number. And how did we find the fraction or the decimal? Well, all percentages are out of 100. So whatever your percentage is you can just stick it over 100. And if you can easily find equivalent fractions to that, like we did here for 1/4 and 3/4 and 1/2, then you can just multiply your number by that fraction. If it's not a number that's easily, or you can easily find an equivalent fraction for, you can use the decimal method. Hope this was helpful.